My wife said, "My sister is going through a divorce. She needs me every night this week." I replied, "You're a good sister." Then her sister posted happy anniversary photos with her husband. I waited outside my wife's office. She left with him. Their faces turned to stone when they saw me. That's how it started. Not with some dramatic explosion or confrontation in a restaurant. Just me, Raymond Tate, 41 years old, sitting in my 10-year-old Honda Civic in a parking garage, watching my wife of 12 years walk out of her office building with another man's hand on her back. But let me back up a little. Give you the whole picture before we get to the part where everything goes sideways. I'm an IT field engineer. Nothing glamorous about it. I fix servers, install networks, troubleshoot systems that crash at the worst possible moments. It pays decent, keeps the lights on, and gives me enough flexibility to pick up our 8-year-old son Andrew from school when Melissa has to work late, which lately has been happening a lot. Melissa works in corporate HR consulting. She's good at it too. Charming, professional, knows how to handle difficult people. I used to think that was one of her best qualities. Turns out, being good at handling people includes being good at handling me. The sister thing started 3 weeks ago. Jennifer, Melissa's younger sister, was supposedly having marriage troubles. According to Melissa, David had been distant. They were fighting constantly, and Jennifer needed someone to talk to, someone to hold her hand through what was shaping up to be a messy separation. "She's really struggling, Ray," Melissa told me over dinner one Tuesday night. Andrew was upstairs doing homework, and we had the kitchen to ourselves. "I think David might be seeing someone else." I made the appropriate sympathetic noises, asked if there was anything I could do to help. Melissa shook her head, gave me that sad smile that made me want to fix everything for her. "Just be patient with me, okay? She needs me right now." Patient. That's what I've been for 12 years. Patient when her career took priority over mine. Patient when she decided we needed to move to this suburb 40 minutes from my job because the schools were better. Patient when her friends became our social circle and mine gradually faded away. The first night she went to Jennifer's, I didn't think much of it. Sisters help each other out. That's what family does. I heated up leftover pizza for Andrew and me, helped him with his math homework, and watched a movie until Melissa came home around 11. "How's she doing?" I asked. "Better. We talked for hours. I think it helped." The second night followed the same pattern, and the third. By the fourth night, I was starting to notice things, like how Melissa seemed more energetic when she came home, not drained the way you'd expect after consoling a heartbroken sister. How she'd started wearing perfume again, something she hadn't done regularly in years. How she'd check her phone constantly and smile at messages she wouldn't share. But I'm not a suspicious person by nature. I believe what people tell me until I have reason not to. Maybe that makes me naive. Maybe it makes me a decent human being. Either way, it took me longer than it should have to start asking questions. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night. I was scrolling through social media while Andrew watched cartoons, just mindlessly browsing through the usual mix of political rants and vacation photos. That's when I saw it. Jennifer's post from the night before. A picture of her and David at some upscale restaurant downtown. She was wearing a red dress, he had his arm around her, and they both looked happy. Really happy. The caption read, "15 years married today. Here's to 15 more with my best friend and the love of my life." I stared at the screen for a long time. Read the caption 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding something. Check the date stamp. Wednesday night, 8:47 p.m. The same Wednesday night Melissa had spent consoling Jennifer through her marital crisis. My first thought was that maybe Jennifer was putting on a brave face. Maybe she and David were trying to work things out, and the anniversary dinner was part of that process. People post happy photos all the time when their lives are falling apart. Social media is basically professional-grade lying. But then I looked closer at the photo. Really looked. Jennifer's smile wasn't forced or brittle. David wasn't maintaining careful distance. They looked like a couple celebrating 15 years of marriage, because that's exactly what they were doing. I set my phone down and tried to think of innocent explanations. Maybe Melissa had gotten the timing wrong. Maybe the crisis was between the anniversary dinner and today. Maybe Jennifer had confided in her about problems that weren't visible in a single photograph. Or maybe my wife was lying to me. That possibility sat in my chest like a weight I couldn't shift. I'd never seriously questioned Melissa's honesty before. Sure, she'd tell little white lies sometimes. Everyone does. But this would be different. This would be calculated deception, sustained over multiple days, for reasons I couldn't yet imagine. I spent the rest of the evening in a strange state of hyper-awareness, watching Melissa when she came home, listening to the tone of her voice as she described Jennifer's emotional state, noting details that might contradict the story she was telling me. "She's thinking about staying at a hotel for a few days," Melissa said as we got ready for bed, "just to get some space and figure out what she wants." "That sounds rough," I replied, testing the waters. "I saw on social media that they had their anniversary this week. Must be weird timing for all this." Melissa didn't miss a beat. "That's part of the problem. David insisted on going through with the dinner even though they're barely speaking. Jennifer said it was the most awkward 3 hours of her life." Smooth. Practiced. If I hadn't seen that photo, I would have believed every word. Friday night, Melissa went to Jennifer's again. I waited until she was gone, then called Mike Callahan, my best friend since high school, and the closest thing I have to a brother. Mike used to be a cop before he started his own security consulting business. If anyone would know how to handle a situation like this, it would be him. "Ray, buddy, what's going on?" Mike's voice was warm, familiar. We'd been friends long enough that he could read my mood in 3 words. "I need some advice. Hypothetical situation." "Uh-huh. What kind of hypothetical?" I told him about Jennifer's anniversary photos and Melissa's story about the divorce. Kept it clinical, factual. Mike listened without interrupting. "So what's your gut telling you?" he asked when I finished. "That something's not right. But I don't know what. Could be innocent. Could be your wife's covering for her sister's attempt to save the marriage. Could be a lot of things. Could be. But you don't think so?" "No, I don't." Mike was quiet for a moment. "You want my professional opinion? People lie about where they're going for 2 reasons. Either they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, or they're planning something they shouldn't be planning. Either way, you need more information before you make any moves." "What kind of information?" "The kind that proves what's really happening instead of what you're being told. You know where she works, right? You know her schedule?" I did know her schedule. Melissa worked at a mid-sized consulting firm downtown, usually left the office around 5:30 unless she had client meetings. Her building had visitor parking across the street, and the parking garage had clear sightlines to the main entrance. "I'm not suggesting you do anything crazy," Mike continued. "But if you want to know where your wife goes after work, there are ways to find out." Saturday and Sunday passed normally. Melissa stayed home, we did family things, and I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid. Almost. Monday morning, I made a decision. I rearranged my afternoon appointments, finished my last service call early, and drove downtown to Melissa's office building. The parking garage Mike had mentioned was perfect, elevated, anonymous, with a clear view of the main entrance. I felt ridiculous sitting there, like some creepy stalker instead of a husband trying to understand why his wife was lying to him. But I stayed anyway, watching office workers stream out of the building as the day wound down. At 5:35, I saw her. Melissa emerged from the glass doors wearing the blue dress I'd complimented that morning, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She paused on the sidewalk, checking her phone, and I thought for a moment she might be calling me. Then he appeared beside her. Tall, probably late 30s, wearing an expensive suit and the kind of confident smile that comes from never being told no. I didn't recognize him, but the way he moved into Melissa's personal space suggested they knew each other well. Very well. His hand found the small of her back as they walked toward the parking area. Not a casual touch between colleagues, the kind of touch that claims ownership. I started my car and followed at a distance as they approached a silver Audi A6. He opened the passenger door for her, waited while she settled inside, then walked around to the driver's seat with the satisfied air of a man whose evening was going exactly as planned. They pulled out of the parking area and headed west, away from our suburb, away from Jennifer's house, toward a part of town I recognized as the entertainment district. Hotels, restaurants, bars, places where people went when they wanted privacy. I followed them for 6 blocks before making a choice that would change everything. Instead of continuing surveillance, instead of gathering more evidence, I pulled into the intersection ahead of them and stopped. The Audi's headlights illuminated my Honda as I sat blocking their path. Through my rearview mirror, I could see 2 faces staring back at me from behind the windshield. Melissa in the passenger seat, her mouth slightly open in shock. The man beside her, his confident expression cracking as he realized who was sitting in the car in front of them. Their faces turned to stone, not surprise, not embarrassment. Stone. The look of people who had been caught in the middle of something they couldn't explain away. I didn't get out of my car, didn't walk back to confront them, didn't make a scene. I just sat there for 10 seconds that felt like 10 minutes, making sure they both got a good look at me, making sure they understood that I knew. Then I drove home. Melissa arrived 45 minutes later. I was in the kitchen, helping Andrew with his homework, when I heard her key in the lock. "Hey, you're home early," I called out, not looking up from Andrew's math problems. Jennifer was feeling better tonight. Didn't need me to stay as long. Her voice was steady, controlled. If I hadn't seen her face in that car, I might have believed her. "That's good. How's she holding up?" "Better? I think she and David might try counseling." The lies came so easily, so naturally. I wondered how long she'd been practicing them. Andrew finished his homework and went upstairs to play video games before bed. Melissa and I moved through our normal evening routine, dinner, dishes, mindless television. She seemed relaxed, even chatty, discussing weekend plans and Andrew's upcoming school project. I kept waiting for her to mention the incident with the car, to ask if I'd been downtown today, to offer some explanation for why she'd been in a vehicle with another man. But she never brought it up. As far as Melissa was concerned, nothing unusual had happened. That night, lying in bed beside my wife of 12 years, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process what I'd learned. Melissa was having an affair. The sister crisis was a cover story. The man in the Audi was her lover, and they'd been meeting regularly while I stayed home with our son. The betrayal hurt, but what hurt more was the calculation behind it. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake that had spiraled out of control. This was planned, systematic deception. She'd looked me in the eye every night for 3 weeks and lied without hesitation. But here's the thing about being lied to. Once you know it's happening, you start seeing it everywhere. Little inconsistencies you'd previously ignored suddenly become obvious. The new perfume, the extra attention to her appearance, the way she'd started working late more often, the mysterious text messages that made her smile. I thought about confronting her directly, demanding an explanation, forcing the truth into the open. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the need to understand the full scope of what was happening before I acted. Or maybe it was something darker, the growing realization that I wanted more than just the truth. I wanted justice. Tuesday morning started like any other morning in our house. Melissa made coffee while I got Andrew ready for school. We discussed carpool schedules and grocery lists and whether we needed to call a plumber about the dripping faucet in the guest bathroom. Domestic normalcy wrapped around the knowledge of her betrayal like a comfortable lie. I dropped Andrew at school and drove to my first appointment, a server installation at a law firm downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me, spending my morning in a building full of divorce attorneys while my marriage crumbled in real time. The senior partner, a woman named Patricia Kellerman, walked me through their network requirements while I tried to focus on subnet configurations instead of my wife's lies. But Patricia had been practicing family law for 25 years, and she had the kind of sharp instincts that come from dealing with deception professionally. "You seem distracted today," she said, as I configured their firewall settings. "Everything all right?" I almost laughed. Everything was about as far from all right as it could get, but I wasn't about to confess my problems to a client. "Just thinking through the network topology," I said. "Want to make sure everything's properly secured." Patricia nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't buying it. Security's important, especially when you're dealing with sensitive information. People think they can hide things these days, but digital footprints are everywhere. Emails, text messages, credit card records, GPS data from phones and cars. Amazing what you can discover when you know where to look. She wasn't talking about network security anymore. I finished the installation and drove to my next appointment, but Patricia's words stayed with me. Digital footprints. I'd been thinking about this situation like it was 1995, when affairs required physical surveillance and private investigators. But this was 2024. People documented their entire lives electronically, often without realizing it. That afternoon, I called Mike again. "How'd the stakeout go yesterday?" he asked. I told him about following Melissa and her mystery man, about blocking their path and seeing their faces when they realized they'd been caught. "Ballsy move," Mike said. "Probably not the smartest, but definitely ballsy. So what's your next step?" "I need to know who he is, and I need to know how long this has been going on." "Both doable. You got a good look at him?" "Good enough. Late 30s, expensive suit, drives a silver Audi A6. He works at Melissa's company." That narrows it down. Most HR consulting firms aren't huge. Shouldn't be hard to identify him once we know where to look. Mike paused, and I could hear him thinking. "You sure you want to go down this road, Ray? Once you start digging, you're going to find things you can't unknow. Might be easier to just confront her directly, get everything out in the open." I'd been asking myself the same question all day. The smart move, the mature move, would be to sit Melissa down and have an honest conversation about what I'd seen. Give her a chance to explain, to come clean, to figure out if our marriage was worth saving. But I kept thinking about how easily the lies had come to her, how she'd used her sister's marriage as cover for her affair, how she'd sat across from me at dinner table after dinner table, talking about Jennifer's problems while planning her next rendezvous. "I need to know everything," I said finally. "How long? How serious? What else she's been lying about? I can't make any decisions without the full picture." "All right, but we do this smart, okay? No more dramatic parking lot confrontations. We gather information quietly, document everything, and keep our options open." That evening, Melissa announced she'd be spending another night at Jennifer's. "I thought you said they were trying counseling," I said. "They are, but Jennifer's still pretty fragile. She asked if I could stay over tonight just in case she needs someone to talk to." Another lie, delivered with the same practiced sincerity as all the others. "Of course," I said. "You're a good sister." After Melissa left, I helped Andrew with his homework and got him settled in front of the television. Then I did something I'd never done before in 12 years of marriage. I searched through my wife's belongings. I started with her desk in our home office. Bills, appointment cards, shopping lists, nothing unusual. Her laptop was password protected, and I didn't know enough about computer security to crack it without leaving obvious traces. But then I remembered something Patricia Kellerman had said about digital footprints. Melissa's phone was the obvious target, but she kept it with her constantly. Her tablet, however, was usually left charging on the kitchen counter. The tablet was logged into her email account, her social media, her cloud storage. Everything synchronized across devices, probably without her realizing how much access that provided. I felt like a criminal going through her messages, but I pushed past the guilt. She'd forfeited her right to privacy the moment she started lying to me. The recent emails were mostly work-related, but I found what I was looking for in her text messages. A conversation thread with someone listed as Stephen C. that went back 6 weeks. Stephen, missing you already. Tonight was perfect. Melissa, I can't stop thinking about the hotel. When can we do that again? Stephen, soon. I'll figure out another business trip excuse. Melissa, I hate lying to Ray, but I can't give this up. You make me feel alive again. I read through weeks of messages. Plans for secret meetings, complaints about their respective spouses, increasingly intimate exchanges that made my stomach turn. But it was the timeline that really got to me. 6 weeks. This hadn't been a recent development or a sudden lapse in judgment. She'd been planning and executing this deception for more than a month. The most recent exchange was from earlier that day. Stephen, can't wait to see you tonight. Same place? Melissa, yes. I told Ray it was another sister emergency. Stephen, you're getting good at this. Melissa, too good. Sometimes I scare myself. I screenshot everything and emailed the images to myself, then cleared the browser history and put the tablet back where I'd found it. My hands were shaking by the time I finished. Stephen C. Stephen Caldwell, most likely. I pulled up Melissa's company website and found him in their employee directory. Senior account manager, 5 years with the firm, MBA from Case Western. His professional headshot showed the same confident smile I'd seen in the Audi. I spent the rest of the evening researching Stephen Caldwell. Social media profiles, professional background, public records. Married to a woman named Rebecca, no children, lived in an upscale suburb about 20 minutes from our house. His LinkedIn profile showed a career trajectory that suggested ambition and success. The kind of man who was used to getting what he wanted. What he wanted, apparently, was my wife. Melissa came home around midnight, moving quietly through the house so she wouldn't wake Andrew. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed beside me, but I could smell his cologne on her clothes. Wednesday morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I was going to fight back, but first, I needed help from someone who understood the rules of this particular game. I called in sick to work and drove to Mike's office, a small suite in a converted warehouse that housed several independent contractors. Mike's security consulting business was legitimate and successful, but his background in law enforcement had given him connections and skills that operated in grayer areas. "You look like hell," Mike said when I walked into his office. "Feel worse. I found some things last night." I showed him the screenshots from Melissa's tablet, the timeline of her affair, Stephen Caldwell's professional information. Mike reviewed everything methodically, occasionally asking questions about dates and details. 6 weeks is a significant investment, he said finally. This isn't a fling that's going to burn out on its own. They're planning for the long term. What do you mean? Look at the pattern. They started with stolen hours and hotel rooms, but now she's creating elaborate cover stories for regular overnight visits. That's relationship behavior, not affair behavior. They're building something. The implications of that hit me like a physical blow. I'd been thinking about this as a betrayal to be exposed and ended. Mike was suggesting it might be a replacement being planned. So what do I do? Depends on what you want to accomplish. You want to save your marriage? You confront her with what you know and demand counseling. You want to end your marriage on favorable terms? You document everything and prepare for divorce proceedings. You want to make them both pay for what they've done. Mike shrugged. That's a different conversation. What would making them pay look like? Professional consequences, social consequences, personal embarrassment. There are lots of ways to hurt people without breaking any laws. I thought about Stephen Caldwell's confident smile, about Melissa's casual lies, about how they'd both looked when they realized I'd caught them. Stone faces hiding guilty consciences. "Tell me about the different conversation," I said. Mike leaned back in his chair and studied my face. "You sure about this, Ray? Because once we start down that road, there's no going back to the high road. I'm sure. All right, but we do this right. No violence, no property damage, nothing that puts you in legal jeopardy. We hit them where it hurts most, their reputations, their relationships, their sense of control. We make them face consequences for their choices." He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "First thing we need is more evidence. Photos, recordings, documentation that proves the affair beyond any doubt. Second, we need to understand their vulnerabilities. What do they have to lose if this becomes public knowledge?" "Stephen's married," I said, "and they work together. Most companies have policies about workplace relationships." "Good start. What about social connections? Friends, family, professional networks?" I thought about Melissa's social circle, the suburban wives who formed our primary friend group. Women like Carla Del Vecchio, who lived 3 houses down and knew everyone's business, who thrived on gossip and social drama. "Melissa cares a lot about what people think of her," I said. "Her reputation matters to her." "Then that's where we hit first, but carefully, strategically. We want maximum impact with minimal blowback." Mike outlined a plan that was both simple and devastating. Instead of confronting Melissa directly, we'd let the truth reveal itself in ways that would humiliate both her and Stephen while protecting my legal position. "The key is patience," Mike explained. "Don't rush, don't get emotional, don't give them any warning about what's coming. Let them think they're getting away with it right up until the moment their world falls apart." I left Mike's office feeling something I hadn't experienced in days: hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved, but hope that justice was possible, that actions could have consequences even for people who thought they were too smart to get caught. That afternoon, I implemented the first phase of Mike's plan. I called Melissa's office and asked to speak with Stephen Caldwell. "This is Stephen," he said when the call transferred. "Stephen, this is Ray Tate, Melissa's husband. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee sometime. I'd like to thank you personally for all the support you've been giving my wife during this difficult time with her sister." The silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough for me to count to 5. "I'm sorry, what support?" "Oh, you know, the rides home when she's too emotional to drive safely. The shoulder to cry on when Jennifer's situation gets overwhelming. Melissa speaks very highly of your kindness." Another pause. "I think there might be some confusion. I haven't been providing any particular support to Melissa regarding her sister." "Really? That's strange. She specifically mentioned your name when she talked about colleagues who've been understanding about her need to leave work early for family emergencies." "Well, we all try to be supportive of each other here, but I wouldn't say I've done anything special." His voice was carefully controlled now, professional and distant. But I could hear the tension underneath. My mistake then. Maybe I misunderstood. Anyway, I just wanted to reach out and express my appreciation. "Have a great day, Stephen." I hung up before he could respond. The beauty of the call was its plausible deniability. I hadn't accused anyone of anything or revealed what I knew. I'd simply thanked him for supporting my wife, using language that could be interpreted innocently by anyone who wasn't hiding something. But Stephen Caldwell was hiding something, and now he knew that I was paying attention. That evening, Melissa seemed agitated when she came home from work. She picked at her dinner, checked her phone constantly, and snapped at Andrew when he asked for help with his science project. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just work stress. Some personnel issues that need to be resolved." I wondered if Stephen had mentioned my phone call, if they were trying to figure out how much I knew and what they should do about it. "Nothing too serious, I hope." "No, just the usual office politics. You know how it is." I did know how it was, but I was learning that I knew a lot more than Melissa realized. That night, she announced that Jennifer needed her again. 2 nights in a row, I said. She must really be struggling. It's a difficult time. I can't abandon her when she needs me most. Of course not. Family comes first. But this time, I was ready. I followed them to the Marriott downtown. Not directly. I'd learned my lesson about dramatic confrontations. This time I stayed back, used Mike's advice about surveillance techniques, and documented everything with my phone camera. Stephen's silver Audi pulled into the hotel parking garage at 6:45 p.m. Melissa got out of the passenger side wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something black and elegant that she definitely hadn't worn to work that morning. They walked into the hotel lobby together, Stephen's hand on her back in that same possessive gesture I'd witnessed outside her office. I waited 15 minutes, then followed them inside. The lobby bar was dimly lit, designed for intimate conversations and private meetings. I found a corner table with a clear view of where they sat, ordered a beer I didn't want, and activated the video recording function on my phone. They looked comfortable together, relaxed in a way that spoke of established routine. Stephen ordered wine, something expensive based on the bottle the server brought to their table. Melissa laughed at his jokes, leaned into his personal space, touched his hand while they talked. I recorded 12 minutes of footage before they left for the elevators. 12 minutes of my wife behaving like a woman in love with someone who wasn't her husband. The drive home gave me time to process what I'd witnessed. This wasn't just physical attraction or a midlife crisis. Melissa was emotionally invested in this relationship. The way she looked at Stephen, the way she responded to his attention. It was how she used to look at me years ago, before marriage and parenthood and routine had worn away the excitement. She was replacing me. Not just cheating on me, but actively building a new life that didn't include me. That realization should have devastated me. Instead, it crystallized my resolve. If Melissa wanted to destroy our marriage, she was welcome to do it. But she was going to pay for the privilege. Thursday morning, I uploaded the hotel footage to a secure cloud storage account and sent copies to Mike. Then I did something that felt both petty and necessary. I created a fake social media account and sent a friend request to Rebecca Caldwell, Stephen's wife. Rebecca's profile was public, filled with photos of her and Stephen at various social events. Charity galas, work functions, vacation trips to places like Napa Valley and Martha's Vineyard. They looked happy together, or at least they looked like people who wanted others to think they were happy together. Her most recent post was from the previous weekend, a photo of Stephen grilling steaks in their backyard, captioned, "My handsome husband making dinner for his favorite girl." The timestamp showed it was posted on Saturday night, approximately 24 hours before Stephen was buying expensive wine for my wife at a downtown hotel. I accepted Rebecca's friend request using a profile that identified me as a local photographer interested in connecting with people in the area. Generic enough to avoid suspicion, specific enough to explain why a stranger might want to follow her social media activity. My plan was simple: establish a connection with Rebecca that would allow me to share information about her husband's activities when the time was right. Not immediately, that would be too obvious, but eventually, when maximum damage could be achieved. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Carla Del Vecchio, our neighbor and Melissa's closest friend in the subdivision. "Ray, honey, is everything all right with you and Melissa?" "Everything's fine, Carla. Why do you ask?" "Well, I saw her getting out of some man's car yesterday evening, right there in your driveway. I wasn't trying to be nosy, but I was walking Buster and couldn't help but notice." Carla was absolutely trying to be nosy. It was her primary hobby, but this was useful information. "What kind of car?" "Silver sedan, looked expensive. The man was very handsome, well-dressed. I just thought it was odd because Melissa's car was in the garage, so I couldn't figure out why she'd need a ride home." Stephen had driven her to our house. Either they were getting careless, or Melissa was getting bold enough to bring her affair into our neighborhood. "Probably just a colleague," I said. Maybe her car was having problems. Oh, that makes sense. I was worried there might be some kind of trouble. You know how people talk in neighborhoods like this. I did know how people talked, which gave me an idea. Carla, can I ask you something? Hypothetically, if someone in the neighborhood was having marital problems, how quickly would that information spread? Oh my goodness, Ray, are you and Melissa okay? I knew something seemed off when I saw that car. We're fine. I was just curious about the gossip network around here. Sometimes I feel like everyone knows everyone else's business. Well, you're not wrong about that. Information travels fast when you've got this many stay-at-home moms with too much time on their hands. Why do you ask? No reason. Just making conversation. But Carla's call had given me insight into something I hadn't considered: the power of neighborhood gossip as a weapon. Melissa cared deeply about her reputation among our social circle. If that reputation was damaged, if she became the subject of whispered conversations and knowing looks, it would hurt her in ways that private confrontation couldn't match. That evening, Melissa stayed home. We had dinner as a family, watched Andrew's soccer practice, and maintained the pretense of normal married life. But I noticed she was more attentive than usual, more affectionate, more engaged in conversation. I was thinking we should plan a weekend getaway, she said as we cleaned up after dinner. Just the two of us. Andrew could stay with my parents. That sounds nice. What brought this on? I just feel like we haven't been connecting lately. Between work stress and Jennifer's situation, I haven't been as present as I should be. It was a masterful performance. The caring wife recognizing her neglect and taking steps to repair the relationship. If I hadn't known about Stephen Caldwell, I might have been touched by her concern. When were you thinking? Maybe next month? I'll check with Mom about watching Andrew. I agreed to the weekend getaway, knowing it would never happen. By next month, our marriage would be over, and Melissa would be dealing with consequences she couldn't yet imagine. Friday brought the first crack in their facade. I was at a client site, installing new workstations for a medical practice, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Rebecca Caldwell. I got your friend request on social media. Do we know each other? I'd been expecting this. Rebecca was clearly more cautious about online connections than her husband was about extramarital affairs. I don't think we've met in person, I replied. I'm a local photographer, and I follow people in the area who post interesting content. Your travel photos are beautiful. Thank you. What kind of photography do you do? Events, portraits, some investigative work. I specialize in capturing moments that tell stories. The investigative work part was a stretch, but it planted a seed for future conversations. That sounds fascinating. Do you have a portfolio online? I'd anticipated this question and prepared accordingly. I'm actually between websites right now, but I'd be happy to share some samples if you're interested in having any work done. I might be. My husband and I are attending several events this fall, and we could use someone to document them. Perfect. Rebecca was unknowingly opening a door that would allow me to stay connected to their social circle while gathering intelligence about Stephen's activities. We exchanged a few more messages about photography rates and availability before she signed off. The conversation was innocuous enough to avoid suspicion, but it established me as someone with legitimate reasons to be interested in their lives. That evening, Mike called with an update on his research into Stephen Caldwell. Interesting guy, Mike said. Clean background, no criminal record, but he's got a pattern of behavior that suggests this isn't his first rodeo. What kind of pattern? Employment history shows he's changed jobs 3 times in the past 8 years. Each time he left under circumstances that weren't quite voluntary. Never fired outright, but encouraged to pursue opportunities elsewhere. Any idea why? I've got a contact at his previous company. Apparently Stephen had a reputation for getting involved with female colleagues. Nothing that rose to the level of harassment complaints, but enough to make HR nervous. So Melissa wasn't Stephen's first workplace affair. That information was useful for several reasons, not least of which was that it suggested he had experience with this kind of deception. What about his marriage? Solid on paper. Rebecca comes from money, family owns a chain of restaurants in Ohio. Stephen married up, both socially and financially. Divorce would cost him significantly. How significantly? Prenup limits his access to family money, but they've got joint assets worth probably $2 million. Plus, Rebecca's family connections are a big part of his professional network. He loses her. He loses access to a lot of opportunities. That was leverage I could use. Stephen wasn't just risking his marriage by pursuing Melissa. He was risking his entire lifestyle. There's something else, Mike continued. I had my contact do some digging into the company policies at Melissa's firm. They've got strict rules about workplace relationships. Employees are required to disclose romantic involvement with colleagues, and relationships between different levels of the hierarchy are prohibited entirely. What levels are Melissa and Stephen? He's senior management, she's mid-level. If HR finds out about their relationship, they're both looking at disciplinary action, possibly termination. The pieces were falling into place. Stephen and Melissa thought they were conducting a secret affair, but they were actually building a house of cards that could be toppled with the right pressure applied at the right moment. When do we make our move? I asked. Soon. But first, we need one more piece of evidence. Something that proves the relationship beyond any reasonable doubt. What did you have in mind? Hotel records, credit card statements, something that shows a pattern of meetings over time. The text messages and surveillance footage are good, but they could be explained away as isolated incidents. I thought about what Mike was asking. Getting access to hotel records or credit card statements would require either illegal activity or cooperation from institutions that had no reason to help me. How do we get that kind of information legally? We don't. We get them to provide it themselves. How? Leave that to me. But Ray, once we do this, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain this is how you want to handle things? I thought about Melissa's lies, about Stephen's confident smile, about the way they'd looked when they realized I'd caught them. Stone faces hiding guilty consciences. I'm certain. All right, give me until Monday to set things up. Then we bring their world down around their ears. That weekend passed in a haze of forced normalcy. Melissa and I took Andrew to his soccer game, had lunch with her parents, attended a neighborhood barbecue where Carla made pointed comments about marriage and trust that flew over everyone else's heads but landed like arrows in my chest. Sunday night, Melissa announced that Jennifer needed her again. How many nights this week does that make? I asked. I don't know. I'm not keeping count. My sister needs me. Of course. I just want to make sure Andrew and I aren't neglecting our own needs while you take care of hers. Melissa's expression hardened slightly. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that this situation with Jennifer has been going on for weeks now. I'm wondering when things might get back to normal. When my sister's marriage is stable again. I can't put a timeline on emotional healing, Ray. No, I suppose you can't. But I could put a timeline on justice. And according to Mike's plan, that timeline was about to accelerate dramatically. Monday morning, I woke up knowing it would be the last day of my marriage as I'd known it. By evening, everything would be different. The lies would be exposed, the consequences would begin, and Melissa and Stephen would learn that actions have prices that must be paid. I made coffee, helped Andrew get ready for school, and kissed my wife goodbye for what I suspected would be the last time. Have a good day, Melissa said as she headed for her car. You too, I replied. I hope it's everything you deserve. She didn't catch the double meaning, but she would soon enough. Mike's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of confronting Stephen and Melissa directly, we would create a situation where they exposed themselves to the people who mattered most, their colleagues, their spouses, their social circles. The setup began Monday morning with a phone call Mike made to Melissa's office. identifying himself as an event coordinator for the Cleveland Business Journal. "We're hosting a networking reception Thursday evening to honor outstanding HR professionals in the region," he told the receptionist. "We'd like to invite Melissa Tate and Stephen Caldwell to attend as our guests of honor." The invitation was convincing because Mike had done his homework. The Cleveland Business Journal was a real publication, the networking reception was a real event, and both Melissa and Stephen had legitimate professional accomplishments that would justify the recognition. What wasn't real was their invitation to attend together. Mike had researched the event and discovered it was being held at the Westin downtown, the same hotel where I'd photographed Melissa and Stephen having drinks 3 days earlier, the same hotel where they'd been conducting their affair for weeks. The beauty of the plan was that it gave them exactly what they wanted: a legitimate excuse to be seen together in public, at an upscale venue, dressed for an evening out. They would think they were being clever, using a professional event as cover for their personal relationship. They had no way of knowing that I would be there too. Tuesday morning, Melissa mentioned the invitation over breakfast. "I got the most wonderful surprise yesterday," she said, buttering toast for Andrew. "The Cleveland Business Journal wants to honor me at a networking reception Thursday night." "That's fantastic," I said. "What's the occasion?" "Outstanding achievement in HR consulting. Apparently they're recognizing several professionals from different firms. Will anyone else from your company be there?" Stephen Caldwell got invited too, which makes sense. He's done excellent work on client relations this year. The lie came so naturally that I almost admired her skill. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have been proud of my wife's professional recognition and pleased that she'd have a colleague to share the experience with. "You should go," I said. "You've worked hard for recognition like this." "You don't mind? I know Thursday is usually our night to watch movies together." "Of course I don't mind. This is important for your career." What I didn't mention was that Thursday night would indeed be important for her career, just not in the way she expected. Wednesday evening, I received a text from Rebecca Caldwell. "Hi, Ray. I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. Stephen mentioned he's attending a business event Thursday night, and I was wondering if you might be available to take some photos. He looks so handsome in his formal wear, and I'd love to have some professional pictures." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Rebecca was unknowingly asking me to document her husband's affair. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. "I'd be happy to help," I replied. "What kind of photos were you thinking?" "Nothing too formal. Just some candid shots of him at the event. Maybe a few with his colleagues. Stephen's always so modest about his professional accomplishments. I want to capture him in his element." "I can definitely do that. Do you know which event he's attending?" "Something at the Westin downtown, a networking reception for business professionals." Perfect. Rebecca had just given me official permission to photograph her husband with my wife. "I know the venue well. Great lighting for photography. Should I send you the photos afterward, or would you prefer to review them first?" "Oh, send them directly. I trust your artistic judgment. And Ray, thank you so much for doing this. Stephen has no idea I'm arranging it. I want it to be a surprise." It would definitely be a surprise, for everyone involved. Thursday afternoon, I called in sick to work and spent 2 hours preparing for the evening. Mike had provided me with press credentials that would get me into the reception as a photographer for a local business magazine. The credentials were legitimate. Mike's security consulting business occasionally contracted with media companies for event coverage. I dressed professionally, gathered my camera equipment, and drove downtown 3 hours before the event was scheduled to begin. The extra time allowed me to scout the venue, identify optimal positions for photography, and coordinate with Mike about timing and logistics. The Westin lobby was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. Hotel staff were setting up registration tables and directing vendors to the ballroom where the reception would be held. I checked in with the event coordinator, showed my press credentials, and received a media packet that included the guest list. Stephen Caldwell and Melissa Tate were both listed as attendees, along with approximately 200 other business professionals from across the region. They would blend into the crowd easily, just another pair of colleagues attending a networking event. Except, I would be watching their every move. At 6:30 p.m., guests began arriving. I positioned myself near the registration area with a clear view of the main entrance, camera ready to document whoever walked through the doors. Melissa arrived first, wearing the same black dress she'd worn to their hotel rendezvous the previous week. She looked beautiful, confident, and completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. Stephen appeared 10 minutes later, scanning the crowd until he spotted Melissa near the bar. The smile that crossed his face when he saw her was unmistakable. Not the polite acknowledgement of a colleague, but the warm recognition of a lover. I began photographing immediately. They maintained professional distance at first, mingling separately with other attendees, but their awareness of each other was constant. Stolen glances across the room, subtle positioning that kept them within each other's sight lines, the kind of body language that screams intimacy to anyone who knows what to look for. I captured it all. Wide shots that showed the context, close-ups that revealed their expressions, candid moments when they thought no one was watching. At 7:15, they found each other at the bar. Stephen ordered wine, the same expensive brand I'd seen him choose at the Marriott. Melissa laughed at something he said, touching his arm in a gesture that lasted 3 seconds too long to be professional. I photographed the touch, the laugh, the way they leaned into each other's personal space while maintaining the pretense of casual conversation. At 7:45, they moved to a corner table partially hidden from the main crowd. Stephen's hand found Melissa's knee under the table. She didn't pull away. I photographed that too. By 8:30, they were behaving like a couple on a date who'd forgotten they were in public. Intimate conversation, prolonged eye contact, the kind of focused attention that excludes everyone else in the room. The final shot came at 9:15 when Stephen leaned across the table and whispered something in Melissa's ear that made her blush. For just a moment, her professional mask slipped completely, revealing the expression of a woman who was deeply, genuinely happy. I lowered my camera and felt something unexpected. Not anger or satisfaction, but sadness. This was how Melissa used to look at me, years ago, before life and routine and familiarity had worn away the excitement. Stephen made her feel alive in ways I apparently no longer could. But that realization didn't change what had to happen next. I uploaded the photos to my laptop and began editing the most revealing images. Mike had arranged for them to be delivered to specific recipients first thing Friday morning. Rebecca Caldwell, the HR department at Melissa's company, and several key members of our social circle who could be counted on to spread the information quickly. The photos told a clear story. Two colleagues who were obviously involved in a romantic relationship, conducting themselves inappropriately at a professional event, believing they were unobserved and safe. They were neither. At 10 p.m., Stephen and Melissa left the reception together. I followed them to the parking garage and documented their departure in Stephen's Audi, heading in the direction of the hotel rooms upstairs. I didn't follow them further. I had everything I needed. Friday morning, I woke early and waited for the consequences to begin. The first call came at 8:30 a.m. Melissa's phone rang while she was getting dressed for work, and I heard her answer with her usual professional cheerfulness. Melissa Tate. The cheerfulness vanished within seconds. What? No, there must be some mistake. I can explain everything. She walked into our bedroom and closed the door, but I could hear her voice rising in pitch and volume as the conversation continued. Those photos are taken completely out of context. Stephen and I were simply attending a networking event. There's nothing inappropriate about colleagues having a professional conversation. A longer pause then. I understand your concerns, but I assure you this is all a misunderstanding. I'll be happy to discuss this in person when I get to the office. She hung up and immediately dialed another number. Stephen, we have a problem. Someone took photos of us last night and sent them to HR. We need to coordinate our story before we talk to anyone else. I couldn't hear Stephen's response, but Melissa's end of the conversation made it clear that their secret was no longer secret. I don't know who could have done this. The photographer seemed legitimate, but maybe someone hired him specifically to spy on us. Another pause. No, we stick to the colleague story. We were both invited to a professional event. We happened to sit together. There's nothing more to it than that. She hung up and spent the next 10 minutes pacing around our bedroom, occasionally picking up her phone as if to make another call, then putting it down again. Finally, she emerged from the bedroom dressed for work, but looking shaken. "Everything all right?" I asked, not looking up from my coffee. "Just some confusion at the office, nothing I can't handle." "Anything I can help with?" "No, it's just workplace politics. You know how these things go." I did know how these things went. But Melissa was about to learn that workplace politics was the least of her problems. The second wave of consequences hit around noon. I was at a client site when Carla Del Vecchio called my cell phone. "Ray, honey, I just got the most disturbing email. Someone sent me photos of Melissa at some kind of business event, and I have to tell you, these pictures are very concerning." "What kind of photos?" "Photos of her with that same man I saw dropping her off at your house. They're sitting very close together, touching each other, looking very intimate. Ray, I think you need to see these. Can you forward them to me?" "Of course. But honey, I have to ask, did you know about this? Because if Melissa is having an affair, you have every right to know about it." The photos arrived in my inbox 30 seconds later. Mike had done excellent work. The images were clear, well-composed, and absolutely damning. Anyone looking at them would reach the same conclusion Carla had reached. "Ray, are you still there?" "I'm here, just looking at the photos. I'm so sorry. I know this must be devastating for you. It's certainly eye-opening." "What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet. I need to process this information first." "Well, if you need someone to talk to, you know where to find me. And Ray, I want you to know that everyone in the neighborhood is on your side. What Melissa's doing is inexcusable." Everyone in the neighborhood, which meant the photos had been distributed widely enough to ensure maximum social damage. The third wave came at 2 p.m. when my phone rang with a call from Rebecca Caldwell. "Ray, this is Rebecca. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I received some very disturbing photographs this morning, and I need to ask you about them." "What kind of photographs?" "Pictures of my husband Stephen with a woman named Melissa Tate at a business event last night. The photos show them behaving very inappropriately for colleagues." Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. "I'm sorry to hear that, Rebecca. The thing is, the photos were taken by a professional photographer, someone who knew exactly what they were looking for and how to document it. I can't help but wonder if you might know something about this situation." "What makes you think I would know anything?" "Because Melissa Tate is listed in the phone directory as being married to Raymond Tate. And you're a photographer who specializes in capturing moments that tell stories." Rebecca was sharper than I'd given her credit for. But she was also a woman whose world had just collapsed, and she deserved honesty. "Yes, Melissa is my wife. And yes, I took those photographs." "So you knew about the affair?" I suspected. The photos confirmed it. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more determined. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on what I've discovered, at least 6 weeks, probably longer." 6 weeks. She repeated the time frame like she was trying to make sense of it. "We just celebrated our anniversary last month. Stephen took me to dinner, told me how much he loved me, how lucky he was to have me in his life." "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I know this is painful." "Painful doesn't begin to cover it. But Ray, I want you to know that I'm grateful you sent me those photos. I deserve to know the truth about my marriage." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to destroy him. Professionally, socially, financially. Stephen thinks he can have his cake and eat it too, but he's about to learn that choices have consequences. If you need any additional documentation of their relationship, I have text messages, surveillance footage, hotel records. Send me everything. My divorce attorney will want to see all of it. I spent the next hour compiling evidence and sending it to Rebecca. By the time I finished, Stephen Caldwell's life was about to become very complicated. The fourth wave hit at 4 p.m. when Melissa called me from her car. "Ray, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Someone has been taking photos of me and Stephen, and they've sent them to people at work and in our neighborhood. The pictures make it look like we're having an affair." "Are you having an affair?" The question hung in the air for 10 seconds before Melissa answered. "No, absolutely not. Stephen and I are colleagues and friends, nothing more. These photos are being deliberately misinterpreted by someone who wants to cause trouble." "Who would want to cause trouble for you?" "I don't know. Maybe someone at work who's jealous of my success. Maybe a competitor who wants to damage the company's reputation. All I know is that these accusations are false, and I need you to believe me." "I believe you," I said. It was a lie, but it was the lie she needed to hear to keep digging herself deeper. "Thank you. I was so afraid you might doubt me." "Never. You're my wife. I trust you completely." "I love you, Ray, and I promise I'm going to figure out who's behind this and make them pay for what they've done to our family." She had no idea that the person behind it was sitting in his car, recording their conversation and planning the next phase of her downfall. "I love you too," I said. "We'll get through this together." But we wouldn't get through it together. By tomorrow, Melissa would know exactly who was behind the photos and why they'd been taken. And by tomorrow, her affair with Stephen Caldwell would be the least of her problems. Friday evening, Melissa came home with the determined air of a woman preparing for battle. She'd spent the day at her office doing damage control, coordinating stories with Stephen, and trying to convince their HR department that the photographs were innocent professional interaction taken out of context. Based on the stress lines around her eyes, those conversations hadn't gone well. "How was your day?" I asked as she walked into the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. "Challenging, but I think I've got the situation under control." "What situation?" "Those photos I mentioned. It turns out someone hired a photographer to spy on me and Stephen at the business reception. They're trying to make it look like we're having an inappropriate relationship." "That's terrible. Who would do something like that?" "I have some theories. There are people at work who resent my success, and Stephen's been passed over for promotions by candidates with less experience. This could be corporate sabotage." Her ability to construct alternative narratives was impressive. If I didn't know better, I might have believed that she and Stephen were innocent victims of a conspiracy. "What did HR say?" "They're conducting an investigation, but I'm confident they'll conclude that we did nothing wrong. The photos show two colleagues having a conversation at a networking event. There's nothing inappropriate about that." "Of course not. The bigger problem is that whoever took those photos also sent them to people in our neighborhood. Carla Del Vecchio called me this afternoon with all kinds of ridiculous questions about my relationship with Stephen." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That Stephen is a colleague and friend, and that someone is deliberately trying to damage my reputation with misleading photographs." Melissa moved around the kitchen while she talked, opening mail and checking her phone with the nervous energy of someone who wasn't as confident as she sounded. "Ray, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course." "Do you believe me? About Stephen? About the photos? About everything?" She was looking directly at me now, searching my face for signs of doubt or suspicion. This was the moment when a different kind of husband might have confronted her with what he knew. Demanded the truth, forced a confession, tried to save their marriage through honesty and counseling. But I wasn't that kind of husband anymore. "I believe you completely," I said. "You're my wife. I know you would never lie to me about something this important." Relief flooded her expression. "Thank you. I was so worried you might start doubting me because of these malicious photos." "Never. We're a team, Melissa. Whatever problems we're facing, we'll face them together. I love you so much. She hugged me then, holding on longer than usual, and I could feel the tension in her body starting to ease. She thought she'd weathered the storm. She thought her lies had been believed and her secret was still safe. She had no idea that the storm was just beginning. That evening, while Melissa helped Andrew with his homework, I received a call from Mike with an update on the day's developments. HR placed both of them on administrative leave pending investigation, he reported. Apparently the photos raised enough red flags that they can't ignore the situation. How long will the investigation take? Depends on what they find. If Stephen and Melissa stick to their story about being innocent colleagues, and if there's no other evidence of inappropriate behavior, they might get reprimands and transfers to different departments. But there is other evidence. Exactly. Which brings me to the next phase of the plan. Mike had been busy while I was managing Melissa's emotional state. He'd used his law enforcement contacts to obtain hotel security footage from the Marriott and Westin, showing Stephen and Melissa entering and leaving together on multiple occasions over the past 6 weeks. He'd also worked with Rebecca Caldwell's divorce attorney to subpoena Stephen's credit card records, which showed a pattern of charges at upscale restaurants and hotels that coincided with Melissa's supposed visits to her sister. We've got them completely cornered, Mike said. The question is how you want to use this information. What are my options? Option 1. Turn everything over to their HR department and let corporate justice take its course. They'll both be fired, which damages them professionally, but doesn't necessarily destroy them personally. What's option 2? We go nuclear, release everything publicly, make sure the whole story gets maximum exposure. Their affair becomes common knowledge throughout their professional and social circles. And option 3? We get creative, use the evidence as leverage to make them confess publicly and face consequences in a more theatrical way. I thought about Melissa's lies, about how easily deception came to her, about the way she'd used her sister's marriage as cover for her betrayal. Tell me about the theatrical option. We create a situation where they have to choose between confessing their affair publicly or facing even worse consequences. Give them a chance to come clean on their own terms, but make sure the confession happens in front of people who matter. How would that work? Leave that to me. But Ray, I need to know you're absolutely committed to this course of action. Once we implement option 3, there's no going back to a quiet divorce and shared custody. I looked through the kitchen doorway at Melissa helping our son with his math homework, playing the role of devoted mother while planning her next rendezvous with her lover. I'm committed. All right, give me the weekend to set things up. Monday morning, we end this. Saturday and Sunday passed in a surreal haze of domestic normalcy. Melissa seemed more relaxed now that she thought the immediate crisis had passed. She was affectionate with me, attentive to Andrew, and made plans for the family weekend getaway she'd mentioned the previous week. I was thinking we could go to that bed and breakfast in Amish country, she said over Sunday dinner. Just the 3 of us, no work stress, no neighborhood drama. What do you think? Sounds perfect, I said, knowing we'd never take that trip. Sunday evening, Melissa received a phone call that changed her entire demeanor. This is Melissa, she answered, then listened for several minutes without speaking. I see. And when would this meeting take place? Another pause. Yes, I understand the urgency. I'll be there. She hung up and turned to me with a troubled expression. That was Patricia Morrison from HR. She wants to meet with me first thing Monday morning to discuss the investigation. That sounds routine. Maybe. But she also said Stephen received the same call and that we're both required to attend, together. Is that unusual? Very. If they really believed we were innocent colleagues, they'd interview us separately. The fact that they want us in the same room suggests they think we've been coordinating our stories. Which, of course, they had been. What are you going to do? Stick to the truth. Stephen and I are colleagues who attended a business function together. Someone took misleading photographs and distributed them maliciously. We have nothing to hide. Melissa spent the rest of the evening preparing for Monday's meeting, reviewing her timeline of events and rehearsing explanations for anything that might seem suspicious. She was thorough, professional, and completely convinced that her lies were airtight. She was wrong. Monday morning, I woke early and drove to Melissa's office building. Mike had arranged for me to observe the HR meeting through a conference room window that faced the parking area. I wouldn't be able to hear the conversation, but I'd have a clear view of everyone's reactions when the evidence was presented. Melissa and Stephen arrived separately and met in the lobby before going upstairs together. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in their body language. They were trying to maintain professional distance, but their awareness of each other was obvious. At 9 a.m. sharp, they entered the conference room where Patricia Morrison and 2 other HR representatives were waiting. I positioned myself across the parking area with a clear view through the window. The meeting began with what appeared to be routine questions. Melissa and Stephen sat on opposite sides of the table, maintaining careful separation, while they presumably repeated their story about innocent professional interaction. For the first 15 minutes, both of them seemed confident and relaxed. They answered questions calmly, occasionally referring to documents they'd brought with them, and maintained the kind of professional demeanor that suggested complete honesty. Then Patricia Morrison opened a laptop computer and turned the screen toward them. The change in their expressions was instantaneous and dramatic. Stephen's confident smile vanished completely. Melissa's face went white, then red, then white again. They were watching the hotel security footage. For the next 10 minutes, Patricia Morrison methodically presented evidence while Stephen and Melissa tried to maintain their composure. But their body language told the real story. Slumped shoulders, nervous glances at each other, the kind of defeated posture that comes from knowing you've been caught. At 9:30, Stephen stood up abruptly and walked to the window. For a moment I thought he might have spotted me in the parking area, but his gaze was unfocused, distant. He was a man watching his career collapse in real time. Melissa remained seated, but her hands were shaking as she reached for her water glass. She said something to Patricia Morrison that caused all 3 HR representatives to lean forward with sharp attention. She was confessing. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, with both Stephen and Melissa apparently providing detailed admissions of their affair. By the time it ended, they were both signing documents that I assumed were termination agreements. They left the building separately. Stephen walked to his car like a man in shock, moving slowly and checking his phone constantly. Melissa sat in her car for 5 minutes before starting the engine, and I could see her crying even from across the parking area. I drove home and waited for her to arrive with news of her termination. She walked through the front door at 11:30 a.m., still wearing her professional clothes, but looking completely defeated. "Ray, we need to talk." "Of course. What happened at your meeting?" "I've been fired." She said it simply, without explanation or context, as if the words themselves were too heavy to carry additional meaning. "Fired? Why?" "Because I've been lying to you. About Stephen, about Jennifer, about everything." I sat down across from her at the kitchen table and waited for the confession I'd been expecting for weeks. "Stephen and I have been having an affair. It started 2 months ago, and we've been meeting regularly ever since. The story about Jennifer's divorce was a cover so I could spend time with him." "How long have you been lying to me?" "Too long. And I'm sorry, Ray. I'm so sorry for everything." She was crying now, the kind of deep, exhausted crying that comes from carrying secrets too heavy to bear. "Do you love him?" "I thought I did. But sitting in that conference room this morning watching our lives fall apart because we couldn't keep our hands off each other, I realized that what we had wasn't love. It was just excitement and selfishness and stupidity." "What happens now?" I don't know. Steven's been fired too. His wife knows about the affair. Everyone in our neighborhood knows. I've destroyed everything that mattered to me for something that wasn't even real. I reached across the table and took her hand. She looked surprised by the gesture but didn't pull away. Melissa, I need to tell you something. What? I've known about the affair for weeks. I'm the one who took the photographs. I'm the one who sent them to HR and Rebecca and everyone else. She stared at me for a long time without speaking. When she finally found her voice, it was barely a whisper. You knew? I knew. And you let me keep lying to you? I wanted to see how far you'd take it, how many lies you'd tell, how much you were willing to destroy for someone you barely knew. Why didn't you just confront me? Because confronting you would have given you a chance to minimize what you'd done, to claim it was a mistake or a moment of weakness. This way, you had to face the full consequences of your choices. Melissa pulled her hand away from mine and stood up from the table. So this was all planned? The photographs, the investigation, everything? Everything. How long have you been planning this? Since the night I followed you to the hotel and realized you weren't the person I thought I married. She walked to the kitchen window and stared out at our backyard, where Andrew's soccer ball sat abandoned in the grass. What happens to us now? She asked without turning around. That depends on you. What do you mean? I mean you have a choice to make. You can fight this, try to salvage something from the wreckage, attempt to rebuild our marriage on a foundation of honesty instead of lies. Or you can accept that some things can't be repaired once they're broken. Melissa turned around to face me, and I could see that she was no longer crying. Her expression was calm, resolved, almost peaceful. Ray, I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. When Steven and I first started talking, it was just conversation, harmless flirtation. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But it did mean something. It meant I was selfish and stupid and willing to risk everything good in my life for something that felt exciting. And now? Now I know that excitement isn't worth the price I've paid for it. But I also know that you and I can't go back to the way things were. Not after this. No, we can't. So what happens next? I looked at my wife of 12 years, the mother of my son, the woman who had shared my bed and my life and my dreams for more than a decade. She was still beautiful, still intelligent, still capable of being the kind of partner someone would be lucky to have. But she wasn't my partner anymore. She'd made that choice when she decided that lying to me was easier than talking to me about whatever was missing in our marriage. Next, we figure out how to end this with dignity, I said. We protect Andrew, we divide our assets fairly, and we both try to learn something from the mistakes we've made. And Steven? Steven's not our problem anymore. He's Rebecca's problem now. Melissa nodded slowly, accepting the reality of our situation with more grace than I'd expected. Ray, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you hate me? I thought about her question for a long time before answering. No, I don't hate you. I'm disappointed in you, and I'm angry about the lies, but I don't hate you. You're still the mother of my son, and someone I cared about for a very long time. Thank you for that. But Melissa, I need you to understand something. What you did to our marriage, to our family, to me, those actions have consequences that go beyond divorce papers and custody arrangements. You broke something that can't be fixed. I know. I hope you do. Because the next time you're in a relationship with someone, I hope you remember how this felt. How it felt to lose everything because you thought you could have everything. She was crying again, but quietly now, without the desperate edge that had marked her earlier tears. I'll remember, she said. And with that admission, our marriage officially ended. Not with shouting or accusations or dramatic confrontations, but with the quiet acknowledgement that some betrayals are too deep to forgive and some lies are too fundamental to overcome. The faces that had turned to stone in that parking lot weeks earlier had finally cracked completely, revealing the emptiness underneath. Justice, it turned out, was less satisfying than I'd expected. But it was still justice, and sometimes that has to be enough.